What's up, YouTube? I'm Trent McCare. Welcome to Lean to the Left Podcast, Season 1, Episode 7, a podcast where I and future guests talk about local and national politics in an effort to drive the conversation in a way that helps 99% of Americans. Those are the progressive policies, as you know, which I support. Sorry I'm a little late today, guys. I was having some computer issues and I think I'm going to need to get a new hard drive, but we're going to jump into the news so you can get out of here. All right, we're going to start out with some quickie news. Today we have an update on Governor Cuomo of New York. He is now not only embroiled in a scandal or controversy around the misallocation of deaths from nursing homes to hospitals, but now he's being accused of sexual harassment of staff members and asking them to kiss him and play drinking games with a stripping component. It's actually kind of crazy, right? You're the freaking governor of New York State. What are you doing? What are you doing, Cuomo? It's just not that difficult to not hit on your 25-year-old staffers. I manage to not hit on any of my coworkers every single day. It's pretty crazy. And I'm not a creepy old man hitting on a 25-year-old. It's just not that difficult. You never heard of don't poop where you eat, Cuomo? On top of that, it's gross, right? He's not just flirting. He's not just trying to date, but the people making the accusations or that are claiming that they were harassed by Andrew Cuomo have a very valid point that what he's doing is inappropriate, right? I mean, they're not saying that he took them in the bathroom and held them down, but he's using his position of power, right, as governor of New York and putting female staffers in uncomfortable situations. Now, he claims that it was unintentional. He apologized, but a lot of even his apology is similar to others, right? Whereas I'm sorry you felt that way, basically, and that's just not acceptable. That's not an apology that we're going to accept as progressives from people on our side, just like we don't accept them from Republican senators either. So I hope that Cuomo is taken out of office. I hope that he resigns, but if he doesn't do that, I hope that he is at least removed from office the next time an election is brought up. Next, we're going to get on to a topic that is pretty wild as far as the difference between the left and the right. Okay, so we have the radical left, right? My co-lefties who are fighting for a living wage, fighting for health care, fighting to get people COVID relief, volunteering for Texas and gathering a lot of money, i.e. AOC. But Fox News is more obsessed with Dr. Seuss than having Americans have more opportunities and making sure that Americans have access to healthcare, making sure that America is the kind of country that we can be proud of, right? They're not doing that. They're worried about whether or not your little kid is going to be able to read a racist old book, you know, written by Dr. Seuss, of which there are thousands of other similar non-racist versions, right? And I hate that this is blamed on cancel culture and the left. First off, this is the publisher of Dr. Seuss, not AOC, not Bernie Sanders, not me. I'm not calling for the elimination of Dr. Seuss books, right? If you're reading racist books to your kids, you're going to find a different book. I'm not worried about you not having access to Dr. Seuss anymore. If you're the kind of person like a Rush Limbaugh and you're raising kids, or if you're those types of individuals, then you're going to find your resources for racism. You probably don't even need them. You'll just tell your kids a bedtime story about you in the 40s or 60s or yesterday. Who knows? And if we did have this power as the left to cancel things like Dr. Seuss and prevent the publisher from continuing to publish their book, or the people that own the Dr. Seuss license, we should use it on Tucker Carlson, right? I mean, if we had that kind of power, we should be using it on people whose power we would like to remove. I don't understand the idea that the left has all this power to cancel people, but we can't cancel those that are really toxic for America, right? Next, we got more delightfulness out of the Republican Party. We have here the transportation. We're actually going to pull this from Fox News. I had this same thing from a bunch of sources, but I'm showing you right that you can pull this news from anywhere. The problem is the amount, right? Whether or not Fox News may have this one headline, but this isn't what Tucker Carlson is leading his show with, right? This wasn't Sean Hannity, Lou Dobbs, Janine Shapiro, let alone Rush Limbaugh or Newsmax and OAN, right? They're not leading with this. So we have the Transportation Inspector General, right, who's basically an independent auditor of different departments, different environments within the government as a whole, but specifically within the executive branch. And he is calling for basically a full audit of the transportation investigation into the Transportation Secretary, Elaine Chao. Now, you may be asking, well, why do we care about her? Some transportation secretary over Trump. I'm sure there was tons of corruption in every avenue of Trump's presidency, which we all know is true. Well, it's not just that. This particular secretary is interesting in two ways. A, she's married to Mitch McConnell, if you didn't know. That's right. Donald Trump's transportation secretary, whose sole reason and knowledge base for transportation is that she is part of the family that owns basically the single biggest distributor of or shipper of goods between China and America, right? So in 2016, all right, whatever, some cocaine that was involved in their shipping. Right, and this is what's interesting, is that they don't have the extent, even Fox News. This is why I don't like utilizing Fox News compared to, say, the New York Times version of this, right? So we're going to go to, like, New York Times, Elaine Chao, right here. So if we go to their version, right, this is the report out of the New York Times. Right? This is reporting, not whatever this is, right? Which is missing tons of critical information, right? The size of her company, right? The report itself, right? You can see here, I could go through this entire Office of the Inspector General report, right? So 2018 discretionary grants by the Office of the Secretary, better utilizing investments, leverage, infrastructure. Specifically, we identified 4 grants pertaining to projects in Kentucky that have been cited in multiple news reports. So a bunch of corruption with her sending additional money to Kentucky. We have stock allegations. We have video appearances with her father and her family's shipping business, the Foremost Group. And so we can search that. So let's see if that even shows up here. Foremost, yeah. So like they don't even mention the name of the company that so that's the corruption, right? A huge part of the corruption is the organization that her family runs, right? Which is a New York based shipping company that of course is actually based in the Marshall Islands so that they can dodge all their taxes, right? More fantastic, corruption. 2012 to 2019, it grew to 33 ships. I realize we're on Wikipedia, but I'm trying to get through some of this stuff fast. Valued at $1.2 billion, right? So not a small enterprise. And it's just, and they got themselves part of the PPP, $1.5 million. This is, it's just corruption front to back, every aspect, right? Elaine Chao, this is what we should be looking into. This is what inspector generals are for. This is what Donald Trump rejected, attempted to avoid, right? The DOJ declined both times prior to Donald Trump being removed from office. So this is kind of the typical Republican, politician in general, but specifically, the Republicans are obviously higher up on the total pole when it comes to this kind of corruption. Next, we got a quick follow-up to January 6th. We have information now from Major General William J. Walker, the DC National Guard commander. And he testified before Congress, and specifically some really interesting points that were brought up were in regards to the 3-hour delay between the request from the Capitol Police to the DC National Guard for reinforcements and the delivery of those reinforcements, or the arrival of those reinforcements. And it was over 3 hours. Two things that were really big that came up, and that was, one, the Pentagon removed specifically right before this General Walker's authority to quickly deploy his own troops. In addition, Army senior leaders said General Walker did not think, quote, did not think that it looked good, and quote, it would not be a good optic. The word I kept hearing was the optics of it, end quote, was a quote from General Walker during the not the trial, but the Senate meeting, the Congress meeting, where he gave his statements. And those are was really interesting to hear so directly from him, right? And even Republicans began to call for additional Army personnel to communicate why that was happening. And he was quoted when asked that he agreed that it was, quote, unusual for him to not have the authorities that he normally did. The last really big piece of this is that we have discovered that the Army has already begun lying about who was involved in these decisions regarding the deployment of additional guards to stop the terrorists from taking over the Capitol and overthrowing the government. Let's not forget what they were, who they were, and what they were doing. And surprise, surprise, the people associated with those decisions are deeply, deeply connected to Trump, right? So we have General Flynn, who is, you may remember, was associated with the Trump White House, right? Basically, that he was the former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, right? And it turns out that the Army denied that Flynn's brother was involved in these meetings, right? Or in these phone calls when it comes to the military's response. But that was incorrect, right? It's already come out thanks to the testimony from the general, from Walker, that Charles Flynn, Lieutenant General Charles Flynn of the Army, was on the phone, and he entered the room when the call began and departed prior to the call ending. And that's what his statement after. Now they've changed their tune as to the reality of the situation. So I think that, it's to be expected that the Trump team, as always, is steeped in lies and covering up their actions, which are abhorrent, right? Finally, in the quickie news, we have the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, or MBS for short, approved the assassination in 2018 of an American citizen and journalist, Jamal Khashoggi. In 2018, Trump wouldn't even speak on the topic and never placed direct blame on the Crown or specifically MBS. Right? So this is the level that I get to, right? I don't like, even better than the New York Times or Fox News, is seeing the direct documents. So you can see here from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, something redacted, assessing the Saudi government's role in the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. They redacted a bunch of names and basically said that we assess that Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince, Mohammed bin Salman, wait, let me zoom in a little bit, approved an operation in Istanbul, Turkey to capture or kill the Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi. We base this assessment on the Crown Prince's control and decision-making in the kingdom, the direct involvement of a key advisor and members of Mohammed bin Salman's protective detail in the operation, and the Crown Prince's support for using violent measures to silence dissidents abroad, including, again, American citizen Khashoggi. Since 2017, the prince has had absolute control of the kingdom's security and intelligence organization, making it highly unlikely that Saudi officials would have carried out an operation of this nature without his authority, MBS's. So basically, that's the long and short of it. There's not a ton of information in here. They named some people that were involved. There's basically some additional incidental information. To me, the key is that they've known this. They've probably known this for an extended period of time. I would bet, I doubt that this report from February 11th is the very first that they've had this intelligence, right? All of this information shown here is nothing unknown or new. This is basic understanding. So that, I think, really kind of puts a pin in it, and it shows that, again, Donald Trump was using pay-for-play and was coordinating with what I would loosely define as allies, but they can't be allies if they're murdering our citizens, right? Assassinating our citizens. That's a preemptive act of war, in my opinion. And there should have been sanctions. There still should be now. I don't think that Biden is doing enough. It's difficult to do something retroactively. I understand, right? This happened in 2018. You're punishing them in 2021. But we can't keep selling them arms. We can't keep supporting a dictatorship like this when they're going to kill innocent people, specifically American citizens, utilizing the First Amendment right to free speech, right? And freedom of the press, as he was a journalist. All right, we're going to get into three big topics. We're going to start with the one that we always do first. We're going to start with the COVID update for this week, right? So we're going to do the same thing we do every week, right? We're going to look at the COVID data just available straight up on Google. We'll look at all this data. You can see that this is continuing to go down. This is a fantastic sign. If you look at 30-day window, right, we're seeing clear trends all the way down from 5,000, 3,000 as a rolling average, 5,000. Obviously, we saw, just crazy numbers for a while, and now we're all the way down. For the last week, we haven't had a single day over 3,500. We're all the way down with our average under 1,800. That's really incredible. I think that my kind of assessment is that we will hit a little bit lower numbers than this, I think, on the death side, especially. I don't think that it's likely that we will have a lot of additional increases in death, though it can be kind of difficult to make that assessment. Obviously, I'm doing predictions, but I think that all data is pointing to this trend continuing in this direction. Cases, right? This is right in line. We're continuing to go down. There is some plateauing happening, which I thought would. I said between 50 and 100,000. We could get a little under 50. I don't think that's going to be the case if you have states like Texas and Mississippi removing their mandates, removing mask requirements. As individuals, we need to be doing our best and continuing to wear masks. I'm going to not only wear mine, but continue to enforce that in my place of employment. I think that others should do the same. I think that it is honestly pretty ridiculous that the governor is removing something as easy as masks and that requirement, as well as opening up from 75% to 100%. Some of you might not be in a open state in Texas. If you live in a city like New York City or LA or San Francisco, your perception of what the United States looks like during a COVID lockdown and somebody from rural Texas is not the same. Even in populous cities in Texas like Dallas and Austin, bars are open, restaurants are open. I could eat in a restaurant right after I get off this podcast inside and only have to wear a mask for the first 30 seconds or so when I walk from the front door to my table, and that's basically it. So there's really no tangible change that's happening. So I'm not really sure the level of increase that we're going to see. I don't want to make that prediction just because I'm not really sure how people are going to react. People may take this as a sign that it's time to open up, that they can go do whatever, that they don't need to worry about masks, right? They don't need to worry about social distancing or any of the other restrictions. Or they may continue to adhere, those who were adhering to the rules now, to the CDC guidelines, may continue to do so, right? I'm not really sure. It's still up in the air, I believe. But we'll see. This will be a really interesting case study, I think, to look back on, though the reality of it is that hundreds of people will die because of this, right? If we look at just Texas deaths in the past couple weeks, right, we see that this number, while our cases have gone down, similar to the rest of the country, right? Similar to the rest of the country, our deaths are still elevated, right? They have not dipped to the same degree that the rest of the country has. We're still seeing over 200 deaths per day. That's 1,400 deaths a month. And if lifting these restrictions increases this in any significant degree, right, that's a terrible situation. We've talked about the impact, not just the deaths themselves, the financial loss because of it, the pain felt by those left behind, right? The ability for all these people to infect others who are still at risk. When we're literally just a few months away, right, at the end of May, according to Joe Biden, from having vaccine be available to every single individual. It's asinine, it's Neanderthalic, to use Biden's vocabulary. It is a Neanderthal mentality to reduce these restrictions when we are so close to the finish line. If you think about it as a percentage, right, we've been locked down for 12 months. We're talking about basically a maximum lockdown of 3 more months, maybe a little bit longer, but you could really lift restrictions once vaccines are totally available. So you're talking about 20, maybe 25% more for a huge reduction in possible deaths, right? So we've covered, given a basic update, right? We've got, let me just go over the hard numbers themselves. We have 520,000 deaths to date. That's 1.7 deaths per day. That's another 20% off of last week. Cases are down 75% off their peak. Deaths are down 50% off their peak. And my belief is that, again, we'll still continue to trickle down as long as the mandates stay in place in the majority of America. I think deaths could come down under 1,000. I think that's extremely likely. And I have one more piece of evidence that's going to lead to that as well. But before we get into that, we're going to go back to our good old Bloomberg, where I absolutely hate this. Where we have an update on our vaccines. So 2 million doses this week. That's per day. That's great, right? This map is looking greener and greener every single day. This number came right back up. If you look at this as like a trend line, we would be right in line with where we should be in the rollout. This dip, I think you can attribute a massive amount of this dip to the cold front that came through in Texas. So this average is great. I want it to keep going up. I think that, this spike on those couple days right here, I think that those are, like I said, from the trough in this dip. I don't think that these numbers of 2.4 million in one day are sustainable right now. It just doesn't look like we have the vaccines to get that done. So the numbers here, I think, are just making up for the low numbers on these days, right? Finally, we have in vaccine news, we have Johnson & Johnson had their approval. So their approval came out February 27th, basically right after my podcast, which was on the 25th of last month. And the approval is out. The distribution has not quite started. It looks like that may happen this week, possibly next week. I haven't really been able to find any hard information as to why there's a delay between approval and distribution. You see that there really wasn't with Pfizer or Moderna a gap between approval and distribution, but I think they're just waiting on production. It looks like they found an agreement to increase production of the J&J vaccine thanks to a partnership with Merck, another vaccine manufacturer or medicine manufacturer. And like I said, Biden has stated that thanks to this, we should now have an adequate supply for all American adults to be vaccinated and immunized by the end of May. So that's fantastic. Obviously, you'll have another, even if it was the last day of May, the people who got it on the last day would need another period of time to take their second dose if they're not taking the J&J vaccine. I think that this vaccine, its efficacy is a little bit lower, as you can see here, 66%, right? And this is really the key to me, is that it's providing a shield against severe COVID, right? So this efficacy just means, can I catch COVID after I've had the vaccine? 66% compared to 90s. But when it comes to the end result, right, whether or not you get hospitalized or have a severe reaction to COVID, a severe case, J&J is equally as effective at preventing severe cases as Pfizer and Moderna, according to the studies done for their FDA approval. In addition to all of this, we have a situation where we have, I think this death rate is going to decline even more quickly because of this, right? So this is some new amazing data, honestly, coming out on what's happening and the disparity between deaths in nursing homes, which are of course part of group 1A, 1B, and all deaths overall. And this is compared to the start of vaccinations, whether or not deaths are up or down. Deaths are basically flat since the vaccine rollout in December. Obviously, we had the spike, and now it's coming down. Nursing home, though, just a hard downturn. And I think that this will come out incredibly, right? They're down to almost 20% of the deaths they were having compared to before. I think that this will continue to come down. I think that that is a fantastic, fantastic situation. Cases among nursing homes are down under 20% versus cases in the United States are only down by 40%. So I think that this down to a 40% level overall or 60% level overall versus 20% of what it once was. So this is fantastic, right? This is fantastic news. Now for some not good news when it comes to the distribution. So we found that this distribution is not equitable, okay? And I have two critical pieces of information as to, or this information showing the inequity, and then I have one piece of information showing why that is such a problem. So in the United States, you can see that basically across the board, right, disproportionately, Caucasian Americans are getting a higher portion of the vaccine relative to their percent of the population, and African Americans are across the board receiving less of a portion of the vaccine, especially in the more African American states, like, okay, some of these are even cities: Georgia, Louisiana, Maryland, Alabama, South Carolina, right, where they have high percentages of population that are African American. You're seeing a huge problem with vaccine distribution. You're actually seeing a similar thing with Hispanics. You see in Texas, California, they make up 40% of the population. They barely receive 20% of the vaccines. This is an incredible problem. They were the hardest hit group. They're becoming the least vaccinated group. Basically across the board in every single state, you can see that white people are receiving the majority of the vaccine. And this is not acceptable in my mind in really any way. So I'm gonna grab we're gonna see if I can just Google this real quick. If I can't, I apologize. I did not grab this ahead of time. We'll see if we can find this in the Texas Tribune. Rebound. So before, Dallas was attempting to prioritize vaccinating communities of color, right? And the state said that that was not an acceptable decision to be made, that could not be made at the local level for Dallas County or the city, basically. And here it is. And the repercussions of that are that now we have a huge disparity, especially if you look at some of the larger cities, right? So you have Houston, for instance, where you see this huge cluster of vaccination locations, distribution sites that are focused in the whitest areas of Houston, right? And then up here in this outside suburb, well, it's not a suburb because it's part of Harris County, but you can see that there is a big disparity. I can tell you here, again, another big disparity where I know in Dallas that a lot of individuals in more affluent, more white communities, you can see Travis County is terrible, where there's so much spread out on this side of I-35, and on the poorer side or the more racially diverse side of Austin, there's almost no distribution. San Antonio has actually a pretty good distribution, I would say, in Bexar County. But again, this is a huge problem, right? Communities of color were already being the hardest hit by COVID, both financially as well as with infections and deaths. Now they're facing the brunt of vaccine deficiency, and they also have the higher rates of vaccine hesitancy. So you have a situation where there's these three compounding factors being forced, right? There's literally no avenue for Dallas to take to target specifically low income communities of color, right? And it's just, to me, it's such a tragedy that this is kind of the world that we're in when it comes to the distribution of this vaccine. So that's it for COVID. That's your update for this week. It's looking good. We're on the horizon, right? There's light at the end of the tunnel, and that light is getting bigger every single day, right? To me, that light is basically the beginning of summer, for sure. By the end of summer, assuming that there aren't major changes between now and then. We're only going to cover two more topics today. We're going to cover the fight for 15. So recently, you may have seen that the $15 minimum wage was pulled from the Recovery Act that Joe Biden is attempting to pass for COVID. It was rejected by the Senate parliamentarian, who is a unelected official of basically an advisor who knows the rules and the history of the Senate. And this person advises on whether or not the bill, something can be passed through reconciliation. The Explain It Like I'm 5 of reconciliation is that it's a procedure that allows you to tweak the budget in a neutral way, in a budget neutral way, without needing the full 60 votes to pass a new budget. All the provisions being voted on within whatever is being voted on within the bill, like this one or the amendment or anything, must be directly affecting the budget, not indirectly. And the parliamentarian makes the recommendation as to whether or not these items are being voted on. In episode 4, we already talked about how the $15 minimum wage is necessary. It's moral, that we need it. It's an economic boom. It is a good idea in basically every facet except for elites and politicians, right? The Swanson family, Tucker Carlson of the world, the Betsy DeVos, all these bigwigs, right? The Jeff Bezoses and Elons, all of these people, Walton family, they're the ones that fight against this $15 minimum wage. They're the reason that Joe Manchin and these Democrat, middle senators are not wanting to vote for it. And they're definitely the reason why the Republicans don't want to vote for it, right? There's a spectrum of the economists wing that are arguing against a minimum wage, right? Unfettered capitalism. I think that that's BS. I think that leads to corruption, and it leads to crushing Americans and humans in general, right? When you're paid starvation wages, when there are no other options, and there's no collective bargaining and unionization has been gutted, then a minimum wage really ends up being your only option, right? If food workers could unionize and their unions had power, then it wouldn't be such a problem. They could fight for 15 all on their own and wouldn't need a minimum wage, but that's just not the reality. So the Senate parliamentarian advised that the $15 minimum wage could not be in the COVID relief bill, even though I strongly disagree. I think that $15 minimum wage pretty clearly directly affects the budget, in that anybody who is now brought above some sort of poverty line or income bracket for WIC, food stamps, SNAP, all these government assistance programs, right? Then that reduces the burden on those programs, which reduces the budget. I think that's pretty like A, B, C, right? There's no jumping, there's no wiggling, squirming, hedging, right? The thing that is just literally following a path to its logical conclusion. And the Biden administration have basically come out looking like wimps, right? They don't care. They don't want to go to bat for this. They've decided that when the going gets tough, they're going to give up on helping desperate Americans and helping the people that got them in office. They're shifting blame to this single Senate parliamentarian and Congress in general and claiming that their hands are tied. We have a history of overruling the parliamentarian. The Republicans did it in 2001 to pass a Bush tax cut. It was done a number of times in the 70s, and a bunch of the progressives like Ro Khanna, AOC, they want to see this overruled. Even Bernie Sanders, right, is I think a proponent of overruling the parliamentarian. I think that as committee chair, he knows that may not be popular, but it's what we should do, in my opinion. And Trump fires the head of agencies, departments over nothing more than Twitter beefs, and we can't axe this Senate parliamentarian who, again, is an unelected, glorified secretary for, holding the American people hostage for something that I think that she objectively got wrong, right? So going into 2022 and those elections, we're going to have a major problem. We have the majority in the House and the Senate, as well as the White House, and we're going to come away with possibly no minimum wage, no public option, children in cages, right? Why are people going to vote for the Democrats to hold these majorities when you're not fulfilling just some of the basics that you ran your campaign on, right? We don't want to just go back to Donald Trump without the tweeting. We want real change, Biden. What happened to FDR? So the path forward is rough for $15 minimum wage. We can repeal the filibuster. I don't think that's going to happen for $15. Joe Manchin has come out and said it's never going to happen. I don't think that that's right. We've said never say never. I think that politicians are quick to change when there's something actually on the docket that they're fighting for rather than hypotheticals. I think if you hypothetically asked a bunch of Republicans if they would support Donald Trump if he attempted to overthrow the government, they would all say that they would not. And then basically all of them did. So when push comes to shove, I think that there's a chance we can flip some of these more center, quote unquote, Democrats. Finally, real quickly, we're going to just highlight just a couple things that came out of what was honestly a pretty crazy weekend last weekend with CPAC. We're going to watch somebody else watch this just because it was difficult to find. But here is the basically first day of CPAC. This gives you a feeling for the tone of not just the people attending, but for the rest of the convention.
CPAC to talk about the Bill of Rights. But I also want to mention one thing, and I know this might sound like a little bit of a downer, but we also believe in property rights, and this is a private hotel. And we believe in the rule of law, so we need to comply with the laws of this county that we're in.
So this is one of the leaders of CPAC, not a politician, but one of the organizers, making a request of the members in the hall right now.
But a private hotel, just like your house, gets to set its own rules. Carly?
Where he scaredly defers the critical moment of this speech to Carly.
CPAC director.
Well, as Dan mentioned, we are in a private facility, and we do want to be respectful of the ordinances that they have as their private property. So please, everyone, when you're in the ballroom, when you're seated, you should still be wearing a mask. So if everybody can go ahead, work on that.
Yeah, work on that. Work on wearing a mask.
I know, it's not the most fun.
You have the right.
Now you have people in the background screaming freedom.
You have
and
the right
booing.
to set your own rules in your own house, and we're borrowing somebody else's house. So we need to comply with their rules.
It's ridiculous. It's honestly ridiculous. Next, we have another clip.
Question. Take a look at.
Oh, apologize. We have another clip here. We have probably one of my favorite exhibits that I saw when I was looking at all this CPAC coverage. Luckily, this one comes from Fox News, from The Daily Show to you.
This is in the convention center.
I apologize. Not even showing you.
Well,
Here we go.
this might answer your question. Take a look at this. This is in the convention
So we
center
have
hallways.
a giant gold statue to the glorious leader of the Republican Party, Donald Trump. That was really the takeaway.
With the statue, but I think if anything, it gives us a better idea of the kind of crowd that's here at CPAC.
It's a very pro-Trump crowd, to say the least. And that is honestly part of what makes the whole thing ridiculous, is that all of this happened, all this fighting within the Republican Party, arguing, will they, won't they, will he start a new party? All that came out, and the reality was that, no, he's not starting a new party. He's in charge of the Republican Party. Why would he start a new one? Right? Why would he even consider starting a new party? So it's really hilarious, to be honest, is the only way that I can phrase it. It's honestly one of the most ridiculous conventions I ever saw, where McConnell was booed. Trump took credit for winning the House seats that he did and making up ground there. You have him taking full credit for the vaccine rollout. Oh, by the way, he took the vaccine, didn't do it on national television, isn't really encouraging any of his voters to do so. But you know that man got the vaccine before he left the White House. And then you had Ted Cruz, right? Yelling about AOC, making jokes about going to Cancun. Just the griftiest of the grift, the least American thing that I'd ever seen, right? Wrapping themselves in the flag and then pooping all over it, basically, in my opinion. So that was CPAC. You had Trump blathering away. We're not going to show anything of him. I don't really want to give any more airtime to anything that he's saying. And we're going to move on from what, again, is got to be one of the worst. So many lies, right? If we can, I bet we can look up a lie count from CPAC, right? Fact checking Trump's CPAC speech, right? That he won the election, that mail-in ballots were done by dead voters, that he had early morning vote batches. He's lying about the Keystone Pipeline, lying about gas prices, fracking, refugees, schools, sanctions. Florida, nobody has ever lost an election after carrying Florida, Ohio, and Iowa, except for that Richard Nixon did and lost to JFK. It's really crazy. Deportations, just nothing but lies, right? I'm not gonna give a platform to just the level of falsehood that was coming out of just CPAC overall and the Trump organization out of it. So on that happy note, we're gonna get on the debunk of the day. See, any live viewers, if you want to comment on something that you want to see on the debunk wheel going forward, I'm starting to take requests now. If there's something that you're interested on having on here, you leave a comment down below or drop a comment in the stream right now, and I'll add your comment to this list. I'm gonna go ahead and spin the wheel. Again, we are doing this live. I've never researched in depth any of these topics. I'm gonna show you how to live debunk just like I do here, so you can make sure that the news you're getting is factual. So, Trump will take office March 4th. How fitting that is what we got today, right? So, where did this claim come from? Is he in office right now? We have in Central Time about 4 hours. I think on the East Coast, we only got 3 hours left. So, he doesn't have much time if he's going to get his special inauguration on March 4th, which I can tell you right now, I don't think is going to happen. Maybe that's just me. So we'll go March 4th, Trump president. I'm going to look this up right now, live. Like I said, the first thing, Washington Post. We'll look at that. Let's see if we can find this on Fox News. I doubt it. CNN. Organizers call some nothing. So actually nothing on this QAnon stuff from Fox News. It's pretty funny that Tucker Carlson has made claims in the past that he can't find any QAnon information, but CNN and Washington Post seem to be able to with no problem. All right, we'll take the BBC. That's a good one. New York Times, we go there all the time. We'll do Newsweek, 16 hours ago. Why are QAnon believers so obsessed with March 4th? So it basically has to do with some sort of like inauguration day change from some 1871 act. Why March 4th? Oh yeah, by the way, he raised the prices in the Trump Hotel by 400%. So that's pretty hilarious. You know, he always wants to steal from his followers if possible. So this is a great QAnon post right here. We're going to read this. Assuming the act of 1871 is legit, and it is, right? So assuming, but then it is. 1 + 8 + 7 + 1 is 17. That is the idea that Trump will be the 17th official president. And assuming Trump hasn't undone it, and assuming that the central banking system and petrodollar is trashed, it's not. We're assuming we need a new system of sovereignty, energy. Yeah, it's awful. Absolutely awful. QAnon influencers just showing that these guys are still around on Twitter, right? In different places. You know, it's the idea that Trump will still be inaugurated. He was supposed to be inaugurated on, he's supposed to win the election, and then it was supposed to happen right after the election, and then, some of y'all are going rogue, but I doubt it. It basically has to do with the idea that we moved the inauguration day from March 4th to January 20th in the act, basically. And that's the idea behind. Oh, so it was before the 20th Amendment. That's when it was, in 1993. When before that they took office March 4th. So all the presidents before that, add them all up, there were 16 presidents, making Donald Trump, if he was in office on the 4th, the 17th president, according to these guys. But tick, 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 tick. Not that many hours left. I'm glad that there wasn't a giant storming of the Capitol today. That's fantastic news. I haven't seen anything about that. The prediction has failed, right? They did not carry out the storm, right? He was supposed to make sure that while having Donald Trump come back in office, he was going to execute the cabal of satanic pedophiles, right? And that didn't happen. So all of this is false. I promise. This is really ridiculous. I don't understand how this lie has been going on for so long. But here we are. It's March 4th. I'll check back in with you guys next Thursday and make sure that Donald Trump is not president. I don't think that Donald Trump will be president tomorrow. He wasn't president yesterday. And like I said, I'm going to call that debunked. So there you have it. Donald Trump is not president on March 4th. He won't be president in the next 4 hours. So we're just going to move on and start making sure that Donald Trump isn't president in 2024 when he runs next time. That's the number one goal of this podcast. And with that, we're just going to get into what you can do this week. This week, what I want you to do, if you can, if you have the means, go and support Nina Turner for Congress. Stand with Nina on a great addition to the squad. I think that she will definitely be the bulldog of the squad, right? She's a true advocate for everyday Americans. She's been doing this since the beginning. She's an OG with Bernie Sanders, and you should support her for Congress. She's running for an open seat right now in a special election. So donations to her are some of your best to any political candidate who's not running in your local election, which may be coming up soon. So support Nina Turner, support Lean to the Left, support progressive platforms. That's it for today's episode. It's been a great week. We had some setbacks this week, but we're going to keep fighting. It's not over. New live stream every Thursday, 7 p.m. Central. If you like the content, please like the video. I have a goal of 100 subscribers, so click that subscribe button. And I'll be back next week with another episode. Thank you.